Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. This is Ukraine War News Update. First part there for the 8th of May 2025. We'll start with the Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply, of course, and you can find them linked in the description to the video below. 1,200 personnel lost is pretty much where we've seen it recently. 2 tanks, very low in that category. 10 troop-carrying AFVs, under half the daily average there. 50 artillery systems, again, pretty useful number in that category as we consistently see. That's over double the daily average. 1 multiple launch rocket system, 1 anti-aircraft warfare system, 120 vehicles and fuel tanks, pretty significant there. 2 pieces of special equipment, so nothing incredible in that list, but just grinding losses for the Russians. Artillery systems typically high, everything else is fairly standard. I mean, 120 vehicles and fuel tanks is high, but we have seen much higher than that previously. Just to let you know that the levels of human safariness are still going on, and actually not just in places like Kherson. I saw a civilian car destroyed in Kharkiv today. There's no limit to the barbarism of the Russians, says this source. Russian human safaris reached a whole new level this morning, yesterday morning. The bastards attacked an emergency medical vehicle with FPV drones in Konstantinivka, Donetsk. Of course, the world won't notice this. So that's a sort of typical thing that we see. Unfortunately, just lots of strikes at civilian infrastructure, civilians, and emergency services, not just double taps, but drones hitting. We have, unfortunately, base UA. I've interviewed Anton several times. I've visited the base UA headquarters in Kramatorsk. Their volunteer, Pierre, knows him as Pierre's associated with this channel. Eddie has lost an arm and a leg as their vehicle evacuating civilians was hit by a drone. We have had Anton's vehicle has been hit. There was that time it was hit with 2 drones, I believe. Just incredible barbarism from the Russians. Okay, here we have a video with a hangar with logistics vehicles being entered by an FPV drone, I think on fiber optics, and amazing what you can find in these places. Oh, there we go. Quite a nice little bit of equipment here. 2 pieces of equipment hiding out, and these obviously get taken out by the FPV drone, and that's the end of that warehouse, I guess, and the vehicles therein. Usefulness of these drones. Actually, here's one drone coming into the warehouse afterwards to survey the damage, and you can see that the drones have done their job there. Now, I didn't know quite where to put this, whether it's a kind of Russia on fire or whether this is a strike, because there was the truce that was called at midnight last night, Russian time, and we've seen no Shahed attacks. And then this happened yesterday, but just unsure as to why it happened. So there's a few instances like this where I'm like, don't know if it's a strike from drones or whether it's Russia on fire, careless Russian smoker. A couple of incidents, says Tim White, in Russia. In Yakutia, a big explosion hit a coal preparation plant. There were injuries and deaths in the blast in Nerengri, thought to be caused by methane igniting, unlikely to be war related. But of course, anything like that is exactly what the Ukrainians would want to see. Anything that harms the Russian industry, that is propping up the Russian war effort. Then we have this is a KAMAZ factory, and this was, when was this? So 8th. This is from this morning. This is one I was more unsure of as to whether it was anything to do with a strike, but it doesn't seem like there are any Ukrainian drones last night, as well as there being no Russian drones. Located 1,255 kilometers from Ukraine, the main factory for manufacturing Russian KAMAZ trucks is burning, and that can be seen from several directions. Russian Telegram channels reporting a large fire at the KAMAZ plant in Tatarstan. KAMAZ is the main supplier of vehicle equipment for the Russian army. It produces diesel engines, trucks, etc., and it's under US, UK, EU, and Canadian restrictions. So that is, I guess, very good news for the Ukrainians, because KAMAZ is a major producer of equipment, as we've heard. So that looks like a significant fire going off there. Then we hear that military communications in Moscow Oblast have been sabotaged amid Russia's Victory Day celebrations, according to Partisans. Again, it's the Atesh Partisan group, claiming that they have, in fact, if we go to, I don't know if it's worth going to their post. No, that's no report. So they claim an agent of the Atesh movement successfully carried out sabotage in the village of Mogiltsy in Moscow Oblast, destroying equipment at a transformer substation that provided the region's electrical and telecommunications infrastructure. The group said on Telegram. It's about 45 kilometers northeast of Moscow, where foreign officials have been invited for Russia's Victory Day celebrations. Quote, communication interruptions occurred at a number of important military facilities, including the 629th Anti-Aircraft Missile Regiment, the 21st Separate Operational Purpose Regiment, brigade, as well as the military town where military units and those numbers there are located. So that seems to have been pretty good. Indeed, no report says Ukrainian partisan group Atesh claims responsibility for sabotage near Moscow, destroying a transformer substation in Mogiltsy. They claim power and comms at multiple key military sites have been disrupted. So I don't know how much that sort of carried on into the substation, but the claim is that they've disrupted military comms there. Now, sadly, we heard yesterday that 2 volunteers died in Ukraine in a mine clearing incident. It's a dangerous thing to do, of course, and one of them was a British aid worker, Chris Garrett. Is someone I followed on Instagram, as he's known as Swampy. Garrett, 42, from the Isle of Man, was widely known for his high-risk volunteer work removing mines and unexploded ordnance left behind by the Russian forces. So that's now being reported quite widely across the media. Here we got reference to it in The Sun, a reference to him in The Sun, and I think even Financial Times' Christopher Miller here saying terrible news from Ukraine that Christopher Swampy Garrett, a mine clearing expert and volunteer, has been actively helping the country's armed forces and civilians for years, has died along with a second member of his team, according to the announcement below from a colleague. And this is Sean Pinner. I've interviewed Sean a number of times. Following up on my previous message, says Sean, it's now been confirmed that 2 of the 3 critically injured individuals have sadly passed away. I can confirm that Chris was among those who died. Our thoughts and prayers are with the families affected. We deeply appreciate all the support during a difficult time. Prevail, which is the organisation that he's working for, will share further updates as soon as we coordinate with the investigation teams over the next 48 hours. We can't and will not comment during an ongoing investigation. Please be patient. Thank you. Yeah, I think Prevail that's certainly who Sean Pin is associated with. Prevail Together. So with tremendous sadness that I saw the news confirmed, says Tim White, that Chris Garrett, founder of Prevail Together, died in Izium. Sean Pinner earlier let us know that Chris was among the victims after an incident in the Kharkiv town. Sincere condolences to family and friends. So that's really sad news, being reported, as I say, quite widely. He was fairly well known. 40-year-old worked as a volunteer at the National Guard, helped demine Crimea from 2014 to 2017, and returned with the start of the full-scale invasion, teaching the military sapper skills. Sad news there, definitely. Co-founder of Prevail Together NGO, which confirmed his death and the serious injuries of other members of the organisation. And then we hear of the death of someone else. So this is the head of the Military Medical Commission of the local Ministry of Internal Affairs. Is that MVD? Died during an alarm in Sevastopol, according to Russian media. So an air raid alarm had gone off. He had gone out shooting outside and accidentally shot himself in the head, essentially. Colonel Tokarev accidentally shot himself in the head with a traumatic weapon during a massive attack on the night of May the 2nd. According to sources, he was frightened by the air raid, after which he went out into the yard with a weapon and started shooting. Relatives tried to calm him down, but a fatal shot was fired. Now we're going to talk about the truce, the 3-day truce that has been dictated by Vladimir Putin. As of midnight, said the Russians, on May the 8th, all Russian troop movements in the SVO zone have completely ceased combat operations. All troop groups, the Russian Defense Ministry has reported. The Russian armed forces strictly observe the ceasefire regime, do not carry out strikes with aircraft, missile forces and artillery, drones, according to the department. Despite the announcement of the ceasefire, the Ukrainian armed forces have not ceased military operations against the Russian forces. So that's what they claimed. Meanwhile, the Ukrainians are like, no, there's been no ceasefire, no truce at all. Russia has bombed Sumy Oblast on the first day of its own declared ceasefire. Ukraine's Air Force says Russia bombed the area despite Moscow's unilaterally declared ceasefire set to begin at midnight and last through the 10th of May. Lieutenant of the AFU, call sign Alex, reports no ceasefire on the cross front. Infantry assaults continue relentlessly with no breaks in between. The fight is ongoing. Then we hear Andriy Kovalenko, head of Ukraine's Center of Countering Disinformation, say Russia is lying. The so-called ceasefire never took effect. Quote, they are still attacking. No shahids in the sky doesn't mean peace. A real ceasefire means no assaults, no shooting, total silence. And then we have Russia's so-called truce is nowhere to be seen on the front, says Viktor Trigubov, a spokesman for the Ukraine's Kortsia operational group of troops. Despite reduced activity in some areas, he says clashes continue across multiple fronts, from Liman to Vovchansk and Chasiv Yar to Pokrovsk. And then we have Anton Gerashenko listing all of the stuff that's going on. And this is what Putin's ceasefire looks like. An elderly woman was rescued from the rubble in Belopilya, Sumy region after a KAB strike, a car bomb, these guided glide bombs. One residential building was completely destroyed in Sumy district. 3 houses caught fire as a result of a Russian attack last night, killing at least 1 person. And then he lists all of this stuff that's been going on. Drone strikes. That'll probably be the smaller sort of drones on the front line. Konstantinivka shelling. 6 Kub 250 bombs dropped in Ilinivka, 1 person killed and 1 injured, 7 private homes damaged, 2 civilians killed in Alexandro Kalinove as a result of 2 bombs exploding there. In Sofivka, Russian occupied shelled a farm. Minorad, a drone strike killed 2 people, 1 dead and 1 injured in Pokrovsk. In Dorozhnie, a Russian drone attacked a car. A person was killed. A civilian was injured in Shakova. 2 cars were damaged. So on and so forth. And also, when you list these things, these incidents like this, as Anton Gerashenko has done, you realize how many civilians are dying in different parts of the front line, just regularly. That is a truce day. That's a day when things are supposed to be, well, non-existent, let alone calmer. Imagine what it's like when the fighting is at its fiercest. So absolutely incredible there. Now, Andriy Sybiha, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, has said Putin's parade ceasefire is a farce. From midnight to midday, Russia violated it 734 times, launched 63 assaults, 176 FPV drone strikes and 16 guided bombs. Ukraine shares evidence with partners. Putin can't be trusted. He breaks even his own word. And yeah, he gets a full details there. To which the Russians have then come out and said, the Russian Ministry of Defense reports or complains that Ukraine didn't stop fighting during Putin's ceasefire, as if Ukraine ever agreed to his PR stunt anyway. Declaring a fake truce and whining when no one obeys it is peak Kremlin delusion. So they're complaining that the Ukrainians have broken the truce. A, the Ukrainians never agreed to the truce, and B, the Russians have broken it 1,000 times. So, shut up, essentially. Now, last night, there were no drones, as far as I can tell, from either side after midnight. These were the drones that I believe took place before midnight. Ukraine shot down 20 drones and 6 decoy drones during Russia's 3rd attack wave on May the 7th, launched from Milorovo in Russia. All targets failed to hit. Decoys were lost without consequences. So it seems like, I guess that's 100% success rate, or at least 100% interception rate, or if they didn't intercept everything, then some of the ones that did land were duds type thing. So like a 0% success rate, if you like. Now, the figures for the night before came out yesterday. I didn't have these figures yesterday. And so just for 2 nights ago, let me tell you that air defenses shot down 2 Iskander-M ballistic missiles. So interesting, they shot those down. And 81 attack drones during a massive Russian strike involving 180 drones. So 81 were taken out, 64 decoy drones failed to reach their targets. So that is, I presume, I never quite know what they mean by this when they say another 64 decoy drones. I interpret that as electronic warfare takes out 64. So in all, you've got 81, so that gives you 99, 64, that is 35 drones getting through is a massive amount. 35 out of 180, that is over 20%, isn't it? So that's not cool. Oh no, it's not. No, it's a sixth. So it's about 17%. It's over a sixth. So 17-18% drones getting through is not the 0 to 5% that we saw previously. So that was probably challenging the night before, but we didn't hear of too much damage being done, in all honesty. Now, because there's no news of any drone strikes last night, particularly other than what we've just heard of the small amount being sent before midnight, we're just going to look at the claims from the night before. And I said in the live stream last night with Jonathan Fink and Greg Terry that the Russians themselves had claimed that the night before the Ukrainians sent, well, that they shot down anyway. Don't know how many they sent then, but the Russians claim they shot down 524 drones during the day. Now, I presume that's one-way attack drones, those larger drones, rather than just FPVs on the front line. David D says it's the largest air attack post 1945 in the world, and on average aircraft radar use interceptors, cleanup, etc. It costs about $1 million plus per intercept for long range drones. That's over 500 million that Russia had to spend last night. Well, who knows, right? I don't know why the Russians would lie about this. I don't know what they get out of increasing the number of drones that Ukraine are sending into Russian airspace. So I don't know whether to believe this. Do I have good reason to disbelieve this? Now, the part I disbelieve is the shot down part, because they normally claim they shoot down 100% of the drones. So does this mean that there were 524 drones sent in and no more? Or does it mean that they shot down 524, so therefore a bunch more were sent in? Or does it mean that actually 524 were sent in? We don't know how many were shot down, but they're going to claim 100%. All of those options are possible, plausible. I just don't know. But I find it incredible that that's what they claim. In fact, they claim 524 drones, 5 Neptune missiles, 6 JDAM bombs, those are guided glide bombs, and 2 HIMARS missiles that they also claim they shot down, right? So, yeah, an awful lot of Ukrainian munitions were sent into Russia the night before. Quite incredible. Now, we did hear of some successes overnight and early yesterday morning. Russia was hit by a massive drone attack. Strikes targeted the fiber optics plant in Saransk, as we heard, and an MLRS production facility in Tula. There are also reported hits in the Kubinka airbase in the Moscow region. And then we heard that the aeronautics fly past, I think today, is not happening, or certainly one that was planned in Volgograd, possibly not happening, and that could be as a result of that airbase being hit, because that was where I think the aerobatic team is based. There's also a claim, I don't know if I've got it. Yeah, here we go. So in Kubinsk then, Ukraine attacked the Kubinka airfield where the aerobatic team is, etc., etc. According to the MNS publication, as a result of the Ukrainian drone raid on the Kubinka military airfield, 1 aircraft burned down and there is destruction at the site. Preliminarily, though, no one was injured, but damage was done. That's what the Russian channels were writing. In Krasnoyarsk, Ukrainian drones also hit a facility of the Russian defense company MPO Bessent, which specializes in producing aviation bombs and other munitions, as I reported yesterday. At least 3 strikes targeted their research and production division. Don't know the BDA though. This picture was from an earlier attack on Saransk yesterday, which was published even by Russian media, which confirmed drone damage at local plants. So the Saransk was the fiber optics plant. And then we're going to go back sometime when was it? Quite a long time ago, as in like a month or two ago. Yeah, it has no date there. But, oh no, here we go. Attack in February. So back in February this year, the Chernobyl nuclear power plant was struck by a drone and it caused damage there. And I was thinking, it's not particularly significant. But the Russian drone strike caused tens of millions worth of damage, according to The Guardian here. Attack damaged the $1.5 billion containment structure over the nuclear reactor, with repair costs likely to be borne by Western governments. A single Russian Shahed drone caused tens of millions of damage to that containment shelter designed to keep the 1986 disaster sealed. The strike blew a 15 square meter hole in the roof. Repairs may take years and will likely be funded by Western nations. So actually far more serious than one would think, and that hopefully that'll all come from Russian sources somehow, frozen Russian assets or something. That's exactly what that should pay for, all those kind of reparations. Okay, moving on to other bits and pieces. As I again reported last night in the live stream, there are claims that Tetkino, just over the border into Kursk, is being surrounded by the Ukrainians. So that's good news, but I don't know how kind of hopium that might be, but it could be positive news from there. Not too much else from the front line. Today's post by a Russian mill blogger: Russians are not preparing for a truce. They are preparing for a war, always. They are preparing to fight all summer, even despite the problems and fatigue. So this is what this Russian source says. Donetsk People's Republic, Russia. The setting through the eyes of the author. 1. Active preparations for the summer offensive campaign are underway. Units are being redeployed and replenished. Inspections are underway from the centre. They are ticking off that everything is ready. Everyone on the ground is already effed, it says. Regarding the ceasefire regime, no written order was received by the assault units that the author of the channel communicated with. 3. Interactions still absent. They take a settlement by storm, and the other unit does not go to consolidate it, or goes very slowly and indiscriminately. As a result, those who took and hold the settlement gradually leave the connection. So I think that's the criticism, that there's not too much communication between different units. 4. Mood. All the most experienced and charged ones have been fed up for a long time. At the same time, everyone understands that the enemy needs a month-long break like air for strengthening and rotation. 5. Replenishment. To put it mildly, it leaves much to be desired. After the war, the issue of the military commissars' actions, their financial scams and their cooperation with the gypsies should be approached very seriously. And 6. Supplies. The army is short of everything. First of all, Mavics. After the scheme for obtaining them has become more complicated, and when you apply, they issue analogues like Siberian ones. The chance that a Mavic from the Ministry of Defence will reach and operate it on the spot is 0. The soldiers themselves chip in for drones, and of course the volunteer decides. So it doesn't look like they're preparing for any kind of long-term truce at all, or ceasefire, but they are ramping up for a summer offensive. But all is not well, though, it has to be said. Summer in Donbass will again be very hot, difficult and bloody, is that Russian mill blogger's analysis. Right, Moscow, as a result of the parade and also the strikes by drones, or the threat of drones, Moscow is almost completely paralyzed. Nothing works in the capital due to preparations for the parade, according to Russian media. Airports are in a state of collapse. Hundreds of passengers are stranded. Companies are cancelling flights. Mobile internet is dead. Restaurants, shops and banks in the parade venues are sealed. Metro is closed. Food delivery is not working. Taxi work is limited. It's almost impossible to call a car, they write. So on and so forth. And I reported yesterday that there were these huge issues at airports. I did a breaking news update on this, that 60,000 people were kind of stuck in the airports. 350 plus flights were delayed or cancelled, and that has knock-on effects downstream. Collapse at Russia's airport is growing. This is what the queues at the ticket office at Sheremetyevo airport look like. People stand in them for several hours to return to exchange tickets for cancelled flights. Now that was yesterday, and today we had the collapse of Russian airports. Sorry about this. Collapse of Russian airports continues. Passengers wait dozens of hours for flights. So the claim is it's still continuing to some degree. I expect it'll be less than it was, to be honest. And then we have this. So as well, there was panic as thousands of Muscovites are trapped in gridlocked tunnels facing the risk of carbon monoxide poisoning after government shut down mobile internet to shield Putin's May the 9th propaganda parade. Kleptocracy is great for the guys running the show. For the other 99%, not so much. So there were issues all over, and that's pretty horrible. The smog there looks pretty, there were issues all over Moscow yesterday. I don't know the degree to which that is the same today, but I guess we'll see. Something else I talked about on the live stream last night was this. Not happy with this at all. Putinist musicians, the Turetsky Choir and a women's ensemble soprano performed on May the 5th at the Assembly Hall of the UN General Assembly in New York. UN General Assembly in New York. And they had in this, you don't see it here because this is like the applause that they are getting. So no, that's actually not the applause. That's some of the performance. But they have these big Russian flags up here on the big screens. I just find it disgusting. Anton Gerashenko said, "This is shocking. In the same day, Russia continues shelling Ukrainian cities, killing and injuring civilians. These musicians support the war in Ukraine, directly support Putin, and are funded by the Russian government. The audience, including diplomats, employees of the UN Secretariat, veterans, and guests from different countries. Ukrainian delegation voiced protests against the event. Sadly, this is not a situation where culture is beyond politics. The presence of such an open propagandists of the Putin regime in the UN is a sharing of responsibility for the blood of murdered Ukrainian children, civilians, and soldiers. This is not a celebration of the victory over Nazism. Russia wants to whitewash its war crimes and justify its aggression in any way possible. It spends huge amounts of money for this, but this is blood money. This must not be tolerated. Do not tarnish your reputation." Really a lot of people not happy with that. Not cool at all. Okay, going on to sort of peace negotiations and discussions between the US, Russia, Ukraine. Vice President Vance says the US wants direct Ukraine-Russia talks and is ready to take part. Quote, "You probably can't mediate this without at least some negotiations." At the same time, Vance admits, "We believe the Russians are asking for too much. There's a huge gap between their position and Ukraine's." And that's the key that came out of this sort of talk he gave. We'll listen to the beginning of it where he kind of leads up to that. So he's wanting Ukraine and Russia to get together. That's effectively where the conversation is going.
Our view is it's absurd that you've had this war go on for so long, and the two sides aren't even talking constructively about what would be necessary for them to end the conflict. And I think that one of the things that President Trump has always been very good at, and he's gotten a lot of criticism, unfair criticism in my view, from both the American and some of the European press, is what I would call a strategic realism or a strategic insight. In other words, you don't have to agree with the Russian justification for the war, and certainly both the president and I have criticized the full-scale invasion, but you have to try to understand where the other side is coming from to end the conflict. And I think that's what President Trump has been very deliberate about, is actually forcing the Russians to say, here is what we would like in order to end the conflict. And again, you don't have to agree with it. You can think that the request is too significant, and certainly the first peace offer that the Russians put on the table, our reaction to it was, you're asking for too much, but this is how negotiations unfold. And I wouldn't say, I'm not yet that pessimistic on this. I wouldn't say that the Russians are uninterested in bringing this thing to a resolution. What I would say is right now, the Russians are asking for a certain set of requirements, a certain set of concessions in order to end the conflict. We think they're asking for too much, okay? And then obviously, the Ukrainians matter a lot. They're the other side. They're the other party, at least to the direct conflict. And we have to ask, what is the Ukrainian? What do they need in order to bring this conflict to a successful completion? And we're going to continue to have that conversation. Now, what the president has...
So, to bring it to a successful completion, well, what do you mean by successful completion? Just no more war, rather than something that benefits the Ukrainians over the Russians, because the Russians invaded, broke international law, and have committed war crime after war crime. But I don't think he's taking any of that into account. But it's interesting that he does think that the Russians started out with asking for too much. Now, that's how you negotiate, right? You put a ridiculously high set of expectations in, and the other side are going to put a ridiculously, low set, or like high in the other end of the spectrum set of expectations in, and you meet somewhere in the middle. So, but it is interesting that JD Vance admitted that the Russians were asking for too much and didn't say the same of the Ukrainians. Now, Donald Trump was asked to respond to this, and the idea that the Russian demands were too excessive, and there's a deep divide between the two sides. Trump seemed caught off guard and asked when Vance had made the comments. Then he replied, and this is something that is so typical. Now, he doesn't really get any briefings, so Vance goes and says something, or something happens out there, and he doesn't appear to have any knowledge about anything that's going on. He keeps asking, who said that? When was that said? What are you talking about? When did this happen? And has to be filled in by the reporters. He's never briefed by the people he should be briefed by. This is a real problem. If you're president of the United States and you're refusing intelligence briefings, and you're not taking information in from people other than, Stephen Miller, and you're just routinely showing yourself to be ignorant of that which you really need to know. You are the president of the United States. Mate, you need to know a damn sight more than you're showing at the moment. Anyway, he said, well, maybe he's right. Maybe he knows something. Oh, it's just, again, that kind of statement is just an admission of ignorance. Maybe he knows something. I mean, I don't know. Maybe he knows something. Who I don't speak to him. Do you know if he knows anything? Does anyone know what he's talking about? Well, maybe he's right. Maybe he knows something, because I've been working on this along with some other things. But we're approaching a point where some decisions will have to be made, and I'm not happy about that. As this source says, a vague but telling answer, Trump confirms something is brewing and it's serious. Yeah, but he doesn't want to make that decision. The key here is that Trump doesn't want to make a decision that will be difficult for Russia. But at least he's admitting that at some point, we're approaching a point where a decision is going to have to be made. But, Russia aren't playing ball. They're asking for too much. And at some point, do you know what? At some point, you're going to have to decide to put sanctions on Russia. Something you should have done freaking 3-4 months ago. Now, General Keith Kellogg, the envoy to Ukraine, is saying, quote, I believe right now our obstacle to progress is the Russian president who refuses to agree. So it depends how successful Kellogg is at getting that message through to Trump. Trump appears not to know what his vice president's saying, so I doubt he knows what Keith Kellogg is saying. So Keith Kellogg might just go around saying this kind of stuff, which is right. The impediment is Putin, but Trump doesn't know. Then Trump gets called to a meeting with Putin, goes and have a meeting with Putin, but doesn't have any briefing. It's just like, it's lambs to the slaughter. It's kind of Steve Witkoff going in and getting chewed up by these Russian experts. And yeah, but it's good news that some of the rhetoric coming out from these, otherwise, I say important people, Keith Kellogg's been somewhat sidelined, to be perfectly frank. But JD Vance is saying something that's at least recognizing that Russia are dragging their feet and not really playing ball. And then we had Scott Bessent agrees that Putin is a war criminal. Now, this is a sort of admission that you would think is perfectly obvious. The International Criminal Court have got an arrest warrant on him, but Trump didn't even know that recently, did he? He didn't even show knowledge that that he had been done for, or they want to do him for, stealing and filtrating children through Russia. But anyway, Scott Bessent agrees that Putin is a war criminal, but peace talks should continue. US Secretary Scott Bessent agreed when asked if he considered Russian President Vladimir Putin a war criminal. He said yes. We shouldn't really be having to congratulate him for saying something that's so patently obvious, but that's where we're at. But again, someone around the Trump administration, or in the Trump administration, saying things that are implicitly critical of Russia. I say implicitly there because he's not going, Trump is a war criminal, well, you need to hammer him for it. He's asked a yes-no question and gives the correct answer of yes. But there is potentially a growing movement within the Trump sphere for the administration to be harsher on Russia. And it's long overdue, but yeah, I guess that's good news. Now, a somewhat pretty dark thread here, I guess, from Chris Owicki. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. It's quite a long thread, but he's talking about modern slavery in Russia and how people are being sold to the Russian army for up to $1,240 each, according to an anti-slavery campaigners. The issue highlights Russia's hidden but chronic problem with modern slavery, which Putin's government has failed to tackle. So there is known to be a huge problem in Russia with regard to modern slavery. According to Global Slavery Index, Russia has the 8th highest slavery rate in the world, 13 slaves per 1,000 people. In absolute terms, only North Korea has a larger number of slaves. Russia's government does less about slavery than all but 6 other nation states. So this is a huge issue kind of culturally for Russia, but actually it's also helping to feed into their mobilized, it's kind of a form of forced mobilization, I guess, where they are able to draw from a pool of forced modern slaves. It's as I say, a pretty dark thread, but it's quite eye-opening. So go and check that out on Chris Owicki's handle at Blue Sky, or indeed at Twitter if that is your thing. I'm just trying to see if there's any kind of conclusion to throw in. So often such victims are even embarrassed to say that they simply do not remember how they signed a contract. This is in the best case. In the worst case, they die in the first week, sometimes without ever sobering up. So again, when these modern slaves are also fed while they're slaves, in whatever context it is, often fed with sort of drugs or drink or whatever to keep them pliant. And and then, if you're getting sold then into the army, then I guess, that brings with it its own issues. Sometimes before being sent to the front, the swindlers manage to sign over all the property of the volunteers, the scare quotes, volunteers, to themselves. Military commissariat staff are in on a scam, according to Alexei Tupitsin, an opposition politician in the Irkutsk region. In for 2024, the military registration and enlistment office workers received 1 million rubles in bonuses, which they divided among themselves. That is, they registered everyone who came in to the commissariat as personally recruited and received 100,000 rubles for each body. That is, in a year, they allegedly brought in 10 people. In one example, Andrei, a man from Penza with learning difficulties, was working in construction when slavers persuaded him to take a new job, saying an extravagant 300,000 rubles, 3,721 a month, paying that, instead, he was sold to a livestock farm in the Samara region. His sister says it was so remote that it was impossible to walk or run to a more or less populated area. It was lucky that this farmer decided that my brother was strong enough to sell him to the military registration and enlistment office. They gave him a passport for this short period of time, drove him around Samara, and there he ran away. Andrei was badly beaten and threatened with death to make him cooperate with the recruitment office. Fortunately, he was able to call his family and get rescued. Ivan from the Volga region had a similar narrow escape. He was taken to a slave workhouse in Surzan and was told he would be sold to the army. He has also happened to another resident. He tried to escape and was caught and taken to another house on the city's edge. Ivan managed to escape a second time and fled to a forest. He was able to contact his family, who rescued him. It's unlikely that either case will result in prosecutions, as ex-slaves are often too afraid to testify and cases are too difficult to bring, so on and so forth. So there's just another dimension to the Russian war effort. Okay, I'm going to move on to just a last little thing about Pakistan and India, just in terms of the fight that was taking place that led to potentially 5 Indian planes being shot down, 3 French Rafales and a MiG and a Sukhoi. Now, it's being reported. I mean, the Pakistanis have claimed they shot 5 down. There's at least evidence. There's evidence of at least 2 shot down planes. Definitely a Rafale, maybe 2 Rafales. I don't know if the pieces were from the same one. And either a MiG or Sukhoi, because they use the same ejector seat, I think. But anyway, Pakistan-India fighter jet dogfight was one of the largest and longest in recent aviation history, sources say. So the dogfight between Pakistani and Indian fighter jets, which Pakistani officials say downed 5 Indian planes, was one of the largest and longest in recent aviation's history, a senior Pakistani security source told CNN. Of course, a pinch of salt, yada yada. A total of 125 fighter jets battled for over an hour, with neither side leaving its own airspace, according to the source, who detailed that the missile exchanges were happening at distances sometimes greater than 160 kilometers, so 100 miles. Neither side was prepared to send their pilots over the border because of a much smaller dogfight in 2019. An Indian Air Force pilot was then shot down on Pakistani territory and paraded on TV before being returned to India, a humiliation he said neither side wanted this time. At times, the Indian Air Force had to take multiple runs at targets. According to the source, Pakistan did its best to warn civilians in areas it believed to be potential targets, the source said, and the military was able to minimize civilian casualties. So this is all coming from the Pakistani side, but it is interesting that, as I reported last night, the Pakistanis appear to have used a Pakistani-Chinese jet firing Chinese munitions to shoot these beyond visual range, right? So these dogfights aren't like, Battle of Britain World War II style dogfights where you've got planes next to each other, twisting themselves into a pretzel in midair, trying to evade machine gun fire. These are jets that can't see each other, having radar signatures and firing a missile off at something they can't see. But what's happened, and what's kind of relevant to this war, perhaps, as we look forward in terms of the quality of munitions and armaments, is that the Chinese air-to-air missiles were very good, and they took out 5. If that's true, they possibly took out 5 planes, 2 of them Soviet era or Russian planes, and 3 of them newer French Rafales. And the realization that Chinese air-to-air missiles are actually very good is going to be really uncomfortable, says H.I. Sutton, to a lot of people who have been dismissing Chinese military tech for decades. So the idea is, it's not as good as Western tech. It's not as good. Oh dear. It's taken down these Western jets. Now, interestingly, not against American-made jets, but the Rafale are supposed to be pretty decent. I don't know what variant of the Rafale they are, but these are, and these will be the export variant of the missile, so they may even have less range than the actual, the Chinese missiles that the Chinese Air Force would use, which would then lead you to think, oh, okay, the Chinese Air Force would have even better success, potentially. So, lots to take away from that I think a lot of military analysts would be looking at in fine detail. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate your support. Look, if you want to help out the channel at all, it's not really about helping the channel, actually. It's Chris Jones from Clockwork Design has helped design loads of really cool logos and whatnot that you can get, sort of merch like this. If you go down into the description below and look at not the UA merch, that's for reporting from Ukraine, I get a little bit of a cut if anyone buys from there, but my own merch here, some of them are split between like colored clothing and white clothing. So for colors, the white words don't show up, but they are there. But if you're getting a white t-shirt, you don't want white writing on the background, but if you're getting a dark t-shirt, you don't want black writing on the background. So there are a couple of options there for all of the different designs. You can go and check them out. And we're up. The reason I'm saying this now, and I haven't said it for the last couple of years, is we're uploading a few more designs, actually, hopefully going forward, including these patches that Chris and JR have helped design. So going to see if we can put them on the side of like mugs or maybe even like a t-shirt like that. So that'd be pretty cool. Anyway, just thought I'd let you know. You can go and take a look at that. Take care. Speak to you soon.